Hello YouTube and welcome to Cognizance is Key, the very first in a learning series I will be doing for this channel. The very first episode I will be doing is on the Tao Te Ching. And if anyone is more familiar with this book than I am, please feel free to correct me on the pronunciation of that. My copy tells me that that is how it is pronounced, but definitely feel free to leave comments in the comment section and correct me if I'm wrong. Now, a little introduction on the Tao Te Ching. It was written by a man named Lao Tzu, who very few know anything about, really. It's speculated that the book was written about 551 to 479 BC, and that he was a older contemporary, my apologies, of Confucius. And a lot of people have basically kind of related him back to kind of a original hippie. And when you really get into the text, in my opinion, I can definitely see why that is. There's kind of an emphasis on just kind of going with the flow, just letting things happen as they will. And the weird thing, if this was written in BC or before Christ, there's kind of a lot of correlation between the line in the Bible of, and I can't remember verbatim what it is. It's something along the lines of, Lord, give me the strength to change the things I can, the patience to endure the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it is kind of intriguing, and at some point I would like to delve more into the similarities between the Tao Te Ching and the differences in the Tao Te Ching between the Bible. But for now, I'll basically just be reading some of the pages and kind of giving my interpretation of them. And definitely, as I've said before, feel free to leave comments in the comment section. I want this to be a series where everything is up for debate. And we just definitely start intellectual conversation. So the very first page says, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name." So there almost seems to be this idea that we do not fully comprehend what the Tao is. And maybe since Lao Tzu says that it can't be named, it's not really a person. You know, we give very physical traits to Jesus. Oddly enough, we don't seem to do that so much with God. But we definitely give very physical traits to things, and we give them a name. So, and we do that with people as well, obviously. So, there almost kind of seems to be this idea in my mind that the Tao is not a physical thing. It's a very spiritual thing. It's non-tangible. And therefore, since we give tangible objects a name, the Tao does not have a name. Now, the obvious contradiction is he refers to it as the Tao. So, I don't know. Take that for what you will. Maybe he was onto something. Perhaps he's not. It's kind of hard to say, especially with a man who, as I've stated before, there's very little known about. "The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things." I kind of feel like maybe that coalesces with what I just said. You know, I'm looking at a water bottle right now, and not too far from it is a clock. So, we've named these things. We've given them, you know, a purpose. But, I mean, the water bottle, it doesn't even have to be used to contain water. It could obviously be used to contain other liquids. You could not even put a liquid in it. You could decide it works perfectly well as a vase. And, you know, just be like, hey, I want to be unique. I think it makes the flowers look pretty. I think it complements them. So I believe that's why he says particular things, is maybe he's kind of alluding to the idea that it's very particular, i.e. very strange, that we kind of designate one thing as just that use. Um, so, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of my interpretation on it. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in the desire, you see only the manifestations. To me, that line has always been about what you desire most is what you will focus on very intently. And I don't know why. There kind of seems to be a tonal shift. First, he's talking about what the Tao is in the first 4 lines, and then in the next 3 lines, he seems to be again talking about how we kind of give designations to things, and then once again, there seems to be a tonal shift of basically not focusing too intently on anything. Maybe saying that if you want something, that's 100% fine, but do not kind of obsess over it. Do not focus on it. Definitely very much realize that there is this whole entire world around you, and that the core of being does not revolve around this one thing that you definitely very much want. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. To me, with how light-hearted Lao Tzu seems to be, or at least our interpretations on him are, that's not as, I don't know, as malign as it may sound. It's not as ominous or whatever. It's basically saying that darkness is mystery, I suppose. No, that wouldn't make sense. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. The source is called darkness. I almost want to say maybe the darkness is wonder, but wonder just kind of seems to be another way of saying mystery. So honestly, I'm not entirely sure with that line. I'm going to have to take a pass on that one. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. It was once said by Serge Tankian, and I can't remember if verbatim what he said, but essentially, what is an answer but another question? So let's kind of shift and think about that. So we wonder why we're here. Some people will say God. Well, where did God come from? Well, I don't know. Well, if you believe so fervently in this God, why don't you know? So that kind of seems to definitely back up what he said about what is an answer but another question. We will figure out one thing, and then we will inherently have at least one question about that. So, I don't know. Maybe in his own right, Serge Tankian from System of a Down was kind of quoting Lao Tzu. Maybe that's something he figured out on his own, but ultimately, going back to Lao Tzu, it just kind of seems like that's what he's saying, is that we will always be searching for answers. And every time we find an answer, we will just inherently need to find another one. And on the second page, it says, when people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. So, these 4 lines are basically just kind of, in a sense, repeating itself, just kind of in different ways, giving you different, what's the word I'm looking for? Different kind of ways of saying that the way you view the world will be your mentality. So if you see everything as inherently horrible, the world will be horrible. If you see everything as inherently good, the world will just be a wonderful place. If you find balance, you will realize that there is both. So that's just kind of one of those things that I feel everybody should learn. I mean, we have people that are just completely ignorant to what goes on, and good or bad, really. And to me, maybe he was telling people to find balance in his own right. Maybe that's just me kind of interpreting his words and putting my own spin on them. But in my opinion, that's definitely a very valuable lesson. You know, realize that some things are good, realize that some things are bad. Decipher for yourself, I cannot talk today, what those things are. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. So to me, this was always kind of going back to the old adage of everybody's like, well, why can't there just be good in the world? Why does there have to be bad? And basically, to me, what Lao Tzu is saying that for one to exist, you have to have the other. So if you want good in the world, you also want bad in the world, whether you realize it or not. And basically saying that you just sometimes have to deal with the things that you do not particularly care for. Maybe kind of going against, I believe there's a principle in Buddhism. Don't quote me on this, I'm not well versed in Buddhism. But I believe there is a principle in Buddhism of just finding eternal, enlightenment and just kind of a state of nirvana, and that this is what Buddhists actively try to achieve. So perhaps Lao Tzu, regardless of whether he was familiar with Buddhism or not, is attempting to say that no, there is no nirvana, that you will have to endure things that you do not particularly care for. And just realize that the things you do care for will not exist without the things that you do not care for. Therefore, the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. To me, that was always just basically, you are who you are, and as long as you are letting that flow, that's just the bottom line. Just be who you are. Do not, unless who you are is someone who wants to change, do not attempt to change, because your attempt at change will be disingenuous. It will be completely just not you. There is no heart in it. So just be who you are, and whatever you feel is right, lead by example. Kind of going back to the old adage of practice what you preach. If I were to tell you not to smoke cigarettes while I'm actively smoking a cigarette, you would not believe me. And you're absolutely right for not believing me, for not taking me seriously. Because if someone's telling you not to smoke cigarettes, you should not take someone seriously who has a cigarette in their mouth. So to me, just in summation, basically be who you are and do what you feel is right and lead by example. Don't sit there and talk a lot. Really be about what you feel is right. Things arise and he or she lets them come. Things disappear and he or she lets them go. Basically, again, kind of the motif of going with the flow. It was once said, I don't know who said it, but it was once said that life is 85 to 90% what happens, and 15 to 10% how you choose to view it, how you choose to act upon it, how you choose to feel about it, etc. So I just kind of feel like that's basically all Lao Tzu's really saying. He or she has but doesn't possess, acts but does not expect. The line about not possessing, to me that's always been kind of maybe saying that everything is fleeting. Going back to the water bottle from earlier, I could drop it, it's a glass water bottle, it could shatter, I no longer have it, so it's maybe kind of saying, do I ever truly own it? I think, though, that this deals more with people, to be honest. We talk about my friend, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my husband, my wife, but that person is a sentient being, completely capable of their own thoughts, their own opinions. They're not something that you control. And as with material things, the people that you care about can unfortunately leave at any given point. So, do we ever truly possess anything? As far as the line about acting without expectation, so think about going to an amusement park and some of the tragedies that have unfortunately befallen some people there. People falling from extreme heights to great injury or even death. They went there to have a good time. I don't know about you, but I don't see great injury or death as a great time, and I'm pretty sure they didn't either. Now, in a more positive light, think about you're going to work and you're like, man, my job sucks, but I just gotta get through this day. And then you could be walking through the parking lot and somebody dropped $100 and there's no one around, and naturally if you go up to somebody and say, hey man, did you drop this, they're going to be like, well yeah, I did, thanks. So the smart thing to do, as much as it may not seem ethical, is to just keep it, because naturally a lot of people's inclination is going to be, well, this idiot just, he's asking if I drop this money. And so, yeah, I dropped it. Sure, give me my money. Okay, cool, thanks. You didn't expect to find that $100, but you did. Awesome. We're not fortune tellers. We don't know what's going to happen. So just go about the day, live in the moment, act as best you can, do what you can do. When his or her work is done, he or she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. I'm not 100% sure what Lao Tzu is getting at here, but my train of thought with this was always, have you ever talked to somebody who they very much live in one singular achievement, and they reiterate that achievement just to the point of absolute nauseum, and you just get sick of hearing about it? So that's not only a problem for the people around them, but it's a problem for them as well if you think about it. If your life is just completely revolved around this one singular moment in time, you do not evolve as a human being. You do not accomplish. You become stagnant, and stagnation is obviously a problem. So that was very much my interpretation on that last line. But if you like this series, please feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe. All the typical crap you hear at the end of every single YouTube video. Ring the notification bell, of course. Man, YouTube gives a lot of features, and it makes content creators really have to remember to say a lot. But if you didn't like this, I thank you for giving me a piece of your time, and regardless of where life takes you, here's wishing only the very best to you and all those closest to you. Have a great day, and thank you.